Okay.
He's getting up there, 90 something.
I think this was a good conversation.
good.
Was that good? Do you feel like I'm a fucking anti-America charlatan who's bad faith?
No,
who just doesn't...
no. I think your foreign policies, after talking them out, they're all like completely defensible and good positions. On the point of,
let's see how that's changed in the last few years. This was from the Leftovers podcast that was streamed on September 21, 2023, so a little bit over a year ago. And after a very long discussion about Hasan's takes on socialism, social democracy, Hasan's foreign policy on Taiwan, Ukraine, Yemen, Gaza, we come out the other side, and Ethan says that he thinks that Hasan's positions on foreign policy is pretty strong and defensible, reasonable, because Hasan was able to lay out all of the reasons why he supports the things that he does. And Ethan says that, well, there's still some issues that I have with full-on socialism versus social democracy, but once again, he thinks that Hasan's foreign policy beliefs are reasonable. Let's compare this to a post that Ethan made over the weekend. When I made this show with Hasan, I genuinely thought he was just a social democrat, progressive like myself. I had no idea his politics were so radical, and that's my fault. 90% of the time, he's shitting on Republicans, and that's what I had seen. But his politics are like a Trojan horse, a veneer of reasonability with extremely radical views hidden within. The cracks began to appear when we started talking about Ukraine, Taiwan, and Tibet. Once I noticed it, it all began to fall apart. So again, this was an episode where they were only talking about these takes. And these takes first started coming up in the previous episode where Hasan was talking about Tibet, Ukraine, and Crimea. And then Ethan wanted to dive into that in the next episode, and so they did. And again, they came out the other side where Ethan was saying that Hasan's takes are very reasonable. Ethan goes on to say, I hold myself accountable for anyone from my audience that was radicalized by him, which is why I'm doing what I can to undo the damage. I've come to see Hasan as mega for the left, spinning alternate realities to fit his dogmatic view of the world. As someone who has been fighting extremism for many years, I cannot look the other way when it comes to my side of the aisle. I'll likely have more to say about Hasan. If this is too much for you to stomach, I am perfectly happy with you unsubscribing. Frankly, shedding some of the more radical portions of our audience is probably a good thing. Well, if he has more to say about Hasan, I'm going to be here for it. And I never subscribed in the first place, so I don't have to unsubscribe. What is this episode going to be about? This episode's basically going to be about the fallout of Ethan's latest episode of the H3 podcast that he did on Hasan. And I'm just going to let everyone know right now that after I do kind of this conclusion to the most recent episode of this drama, the most recent segment of this drama, I'm going to be taking a break from this. I want to spend the rest of this week pretty much talking about election, and just some other fun topics. Like I still need to finish covering that debate between Sam Cedar and Tim Pool, and I really hope that Kamala Harris wins, and if she does, then we can have a lot of fun watching the complete meltdown from MAGA in the aftermath of the election. There's going to be tons of stuff to cover, but I do want to get a pretty good recap of this. Let's start off with Vaush, and I know Vaush is kind of a controversial figure. I still think that he has some interesting takes every now and then.
Our congressman engaging in it.
And I did listen to his view of his covering of the Richie Torres letter. And Vaush had a lot of the same criticisms that I had of the letter, namely that Richie Torres is clearly not trying to combat anti-Semitism with this letter, but he is more of going after pro-Palestinian voices, especially, going after Hasan. But I think this was a pretty good spot.
Civilian well-being, right? Like, I'm sure that Ukrainian and Russian soldiers have both done some nasty stuff, but I think Russian soldiers like 100 times over, because they're totally cool with murking civilians, and Ukrainian soldiers aren't. So it's like a multiplicative factor. In the case of like Hamas and Russia and such by a million times, but also with Israel, because Israel doesn't give a shit about civilian casualties. So, you know, it is absolutely true, though, that there is like a subsection of Zionists where they are like screaming insane, frothing at the mouth bullshit. Even if the stuff they're saying is true, the lurid, obsessive, borderline pornographic way they talk about October 7th is genuinely disgusting. Like, I'm really sorry, there's nothing you can do about the fact that October 7th claimed the lives of like 1/30th minimum the number of people Israel's killed in Gaza. Like, you can't, I'm sorry, you can describe it in as pornographic of terms as you like. You're not overcoming the numbers on that one. You're not.
So that's kind of Vaush's response to the quote that Richie Torres included in his letter, where he said that even if there was sexual violence that happened on October 7th, it doesn't change the dynamic for me. And that's just like a correct, it's a correct moral and ethical statement to have. And I wanted to play one more part of this if I can find it.
Just crazy, you know? There's really no point in making arguments about charitability because what political live streamers talk like, but yeah, it's a funny rhetorician. You are correct. Like I this has largely been elevated by Ethan Klein and Destiny in terms of like disingenuously fronting anti-Semitism accusations as a way of settling a personal beef with Hasan. So it's not like they're referring to this clip. Okay, I'll look at one clip.
So this is about the clip that Richie Torres wrote about where Hasan was joking about kind of the dynamics of rape culture on college campuses and how he made a stupid, edgy joke that basically rich kids should all be kind of forced to be in the same college so that at least the rich kid males would be like date raping the rich kid women. So it's a stupid joke, but again, it is just an edgy joke, and I think Vaush does a pretty good job of dealing with this very insincere criticism aimed at Hasan.
I'll look at one clip.
They were at least Patrick Henry College is like doing one good thing, which is that like if you have these millionaire, billionaire, WASP fail sons, at least taking them out of other colleges so they can only do date rape to other billionaire, millionaire failed daughters is like, in some respects, you know, from a utilitarian perspective, of course, a little bit better. You know what I mean? Like taking these guys.
Literally just an edgy joke. The idea that this is an endorsement of date rape in any way, you would have to be, and I'm being real here, you would have to be genuinely frothing at the mouth insane to hear this and think this is an endorsement of date rape. It's literally just an edgy joke. There's no way to take this as an argument in favor of date rape.
So I really just wanted to bring up Vaush because he's kind of an outside perspective on this. Same with the Majority Report. They've had interactions with Hasan in the past. Vaush's interactions with Hasan have actually been mostly negative, whereas I would say the Majority Report's interactions with him have been relatively positive. And yet they, both Vaush and the Majority Report, kind of arrive at the same conclusion that what Hasan is doing is not actually anti-Semitic, and he is being taken out of context. And he's being taken out of context, namely because he's being pro-Palestinian in his advocacy. And this is kind of a bigger issue that I do want to cover more in this segment. Again, this segment's going to be just me tying up loose ends here. And what Vaush said here is interesting. Vaush has had run-ins with Destiny in the past. That's been kind of like Vaush's origin is in Destiny's community. And that's kind of a bridge that he has with Hasan, because Destiny had involvement with Hasan when Hasan was first getting started on Twitch and live streaming. And it turns out Destiny's not that good of a guy. He's kind of been like attacking Vaush. He's been attacking Hasan. And a big part of this crusade that we're seeing Ethan Klein aim at Hasan and trying to get Hasan canceled from Twitch is powered by Destiny. And I really don't want to get into it too much, but I do think that it is worth talking about. So we can look at this post, And this is on the H3H3 subreddit. And I really do not want to turn into a Redditor, but I think it is relevant to this topic. So what do we see here? Dan Saltman, the man responsible for the recent Twitch scandals, talks about why he's passionate about it as a Jew in America and why he won't stop until Dan Clancy resigns. So this seems like it's a pretty good faith post, right? Someone talking about how I charge Dan Clancy personally with allowing anti-Semitism to pop up on Twitch, and I think that he should be the fall guy. And we can read some of these comments in this H3 subreddit. 72 comments, 242 upvotes. Totally unrelated, but the girl to his right is a content creator called Not So Erudite. She has really cool psychology content, and I recommend checking her out. So kind of a passive endorsement of the people in here. Also, the guy in the white t-shirt is Lonerbox. Excellent content. Sometimes you just need a psychotic guy with fuck you money to get shit done. So just an explicit endorsement of Dan Saltman and what he's talking about here. Kind of strange that they're acknowledging that he's a psychotic guy. I'm honestly enjoying how he cares about it and how absolutely unhinged he went about getting something real done. So again, what are they talking about getting done? Well, it's getting Hasan banned. And are these people the H3H3 fans, or are these people Destiny subredditors? And we can kind of get into this later, but let's just continue reading a few of these comments. This Dan seems like a good guy. His humor is similar to Ethan's and rocks a cowboy hat like Gila. It would be interesting to see Ethan and Gila talk with him about the Twitch stuff. He's leading the crusade against Dan Clancy and has similar views to Ethan on the issue of rising anti-Semitism. I've started watching Destiny's podcast more lately because I find their dynamic entertaining. Dan brings a boomer/fun dad energy that kind of softens the edginess. However, I'm not suggesting involving Destiny with H3 whatsoever. He has nothing to do with the Twitch stuff and would only give the haters a reason not to listen. I just think it would be cool to see the convo with Dan, Ethan, Gila, and other Dan. So this seems like an actual fan of the H3 podcast. They're talking about the cowboy hat that Gila's been wearing recently. They're talking about Ethan Klein's sense of humor. Is similar to Dan Saltman's sense of humor. So it seems like genuine H3 fans are enjoying this person and want kind of this connection from Dan Saltman with Ethan. So let's watch this clip.
One last thing. This is a passionate thing. A lot of people are accusing me.
Holy shit, this is low as hell.
I said this on my video that I did on my. One last thing. This is a passionate thing. A lot of people are accusing me of like fucking around or memeing. I said this on my video that I did on my YouTube before. I'll say it here. It is a real thing. Okay. It is a real thing where people that are Jews feel it right now. Mm-hmm. I started getting my tattoo removed at the end of October last year.
Why?
How fucking retarded are you to ask that? Because I just kind of
Okay. So just two things. One, his tattoo is of the Star of David on his back between his shoulder blades. I don't know why he would need to get that tattoo removed. It's not like it's visible when you're just walking around. I don't understand like the hate that he'd be getting just kind of on a everyday thing. And then also just some unhinged shit from this guy right off the bat. I can definitely see why they're talking about him being psychotic. Like doing like saying the R slur right off the bat for a pretty like simple innocent question.
Answer why he wants to just say it out loud.
because of fucking the anti. Oh, I see. Yeah.
I can't believe he just yelled at you for that.
Yeah, sorry.
I see you. I see you.
It's the yeah, because it went insane and people thought it was joke. People didn't feel it was real. When all of a sudden, all across America, it became really cool to fucking hate Jews. It felt not so poggers to do it anymore.
Yeah.
So anyone who's saying that I'm fucking memeing about it, it's incredibly painful, like emotionally and physically, to do it every fucking time. It sucks.
I don't doubt that. I mean, it's a humongous issue in America, and like, it's one where we passed legislation in response to it.
Yeah.
That's why I want to make sure that we're, I don't know, locked in on the right sort of approach.
Yeah. Listen, I agree with all this. I see a lot.
Okay, I've heard things about loaner box before, but all of these people seem extremely uneducated in what they're talking about. Like, they're not actually they're not cutting to the heart of any of these issues. they're talking in these very like glossy, vague terms of, oh, it's such a big issue in America and it's spreading so much. They're not actually being like, okay, so what kind of anti-Semitism are you talking about? How has it exploded in your opinion? Are you conflating criticism with Israel to somehow saying that now everyone feels like it's all right to hate on Jews? Just some weird and kind of very uncritical stuff coming from this podcast. Also, what is this setup? This is horrible.
People giving fair criticism, and I try to respond to that, but the people that are like, you know, it's just trolling or something, it's like infuriating.
Right? Yeah.
Right? It's not trolling. I'm out for fucking virtual blood.
What will satisfy you, Dan?
Only one thing.
Clancy's
The
head.
bloody hands. of
Bring me
Dan.
the hand.
Also, I'm sorry. I cannot take this conversation seriously. And I think anyone that does take this conversation seriously is either like an interpersonal dunce and cannot pick up on subtext, or is lying to themselves or lying to other people, and they actually don't take it seriously. They know they're joking. Like, look at this. If let's just say that he was serious and he saw a lot of rising anti-Semitism, how would that anti-Semitism take form? Are there a lot more like right-wing Nazis posting stuff like Christ is King, or just posting other anti-Semitic dog whistles that we've seen over the years as kind of the rise of conservative neo-Nazi parties has increased in popularity underneath Donald Trump and then kind of gone into hibernation underneath Joe Biden? Now, I would say they're kind of like popping up again with this election season. So is he seeing that? I don't see any evidence that that kind of hatred would expand in the last year. Maybe there is some with kind of Nick Fuentes and Candace Owens using Israel as an excuse to be more openly anti-Semitic. So maybe that's what he's talking about, kind of the increase in that blatant stuff. Or is he just talking about how people are being anti-Israel and people are criticizing Israel more? And not only criticizing Israel more, but supporting Palestinians more. And I do know for a fact that people that are like pro-Israel see support for Palestinians as being anti-Semitic. That's just kind of the reality of this dynamic right now, where you're so involved in defending this ethno-state that any kind of concession that would be asked of you feels like a personal attack on yourself and an attack on your identity. And so you do get this dynamic where people that are defending Israel cannot concede even the smallest bit of humanity towards Palestinians. And that's why you do get guys like Ben Shapiro who, when they're asked, how can you support what Israel's doing? He'll say, I not only support it, I laud it. I think it's amazing. Israel is the most moral army that has ever existed in the universe. And so you get this like over-the-top stuff. And that's disingenuous. Like, how can you say Israel is the most moral army? They've literally killed the most civilians at the highest rate out of pretty much any recorded conflict in modern history. And now you get this guy who's like, I feel so bad about all of this Jew hatred that I'm experiencing. I'm out for blood. That's not that response, that desire that he has does not follow from the prompt of experiencing anti-Semitism. Wouldn't you, I don't think I really need to explain this to my audience, but if you are experiencing anti-Semitism, wouldn't you want to kind of correct the record, re-educate people on kind of the bigotry, obviously deplatform the people that are being anti-Semitic, and kind of spread more information that would reduce that narrative of anti-Semitism? But he's saying that he wants the CEO of Twitch to have his like metaphorical head on a spike. Let's continue this. This is so dumb.
What will satisfy you, Dan?
Only one thing.
Clancy's
The
head.
bloody hands. of
Bring me
Dan
the head of
Clancy.
DJ Clancy, metaphorically.
Is there anything particular that you want to happen to Hasan?
No, I don't blame Hasan. Hasan is literally a dog that has just gone on the fucking counter and he gets closer and closer and closer to the food and no one's smacking his fucking nose with a newspaper, so of course he's gonna do it. You don't blame it. There's never been any repercussion for him doing insane shit. That makes sense. Fucking obviously. Like, it's not his fault. I would continue to push it further and further and further to get more and more viewers also, okay? It's not his fault. It's Dan Clancy's fault. That he has not set any fucking terms and let him do whatever the fuck he wants to do.
But that sounds like you do have an opinion on whether he should be banned like temporarily or should he be banned permanently, or what
I don't
what do you
care
think
if
his
Hasan
role
gets
should be?
banned. I only care if Dan Clancy gets fired and then the rules start being applied, not just to fucking people that like aren't one side of the
And if the rules are applied consistently on Twitch, Hasan would have been banned permanently a long time ago.
like a million years
Yeah.
ago, 100 times. We need to pull up the clip of him calling Jews fucking inbred.
Okay, so the one piece of actual evidence that he has of Hasan being anti-Semitic is that he called like the ultra orthodox Jews in Israel that were resisting the draft inbred, something that Ethan has talked about. And even if you say that's an edgy, like you could just write that off as an edgy joke. Who really gives a fuck? And again, I don't think just saying I don't think calling Jews inbred is an anti-Semitic dog whistle. At least I've never personally come across it, and it seems to be more of a anti-ethno-state stance. When people are very concerned about the purity of their genetics, it is kind of they do open the door to getting called inbred. So anyway, we have this post, and again, this is kind of the lowest form of content reaction, I would say. I'm reacting to Reddit posts, but the reason I'm doing this is because I do think that it's indicative of the state of Ethan Klein's audience, and I kind of want to portray an accurate picture of where they are at right now. So you have this post where this guy's saying like, oh, I don't really care about Hasan. I just want the Twitch CEO to be fired. And then you have this post and it's retweeted and pretty much consumed uncritically. Not only consumed uncritically, but a lot of support. A lot of people asking to bring Dan Saltman onto the podcast. So this is from their Destiny's YouTube channel. So obviously Destiny, like a satellite streamer for Destiny. And let's just read what this says. So Dan lays into Hasan. So this is the guy, Dan Saltman. And this is from now Destiny subreddit, and this is where kind of the fans of Destiny go mask off, and they don't really care. They're just pretty obvious about everything. So we can just read. I'm just going to start reading a bit what they say. Destiny hinted that he'd go all in on Hasan when the election is over, and I'm looking forward to it. What specifically did he say? Just curious. Essentially that he was leaning in favor of going after sponsors and that everything changes after the election. He did a YouTube stream a few days ago. I think he brought it up there. It's unlisted, but someone posted on the sub about it with the link as part of the post. I don't care to search for it again, but it's out there if you're interested. At the end of the stream, he also opens up and talks about how the cruise is personal to him and how he's felt the burden of anti-Semitism over the past year. Wasn't it before Dan started this campaign? Destiny and Dan make Skip Bayless look like a spineless pussy in comparison to their level of hatred. I am fully on board for the Hasan/Twitch downfall streams. They made Hasan, and now they're going to unmake him. The motivation is not really hate. Skip Bayless lied out of spite. It feels more like their idea of justice. Really should have gone hard on him before the election. Imagine how insanely fucking pissed Hasan would be by not being able to stream during the month of November and completely miss the election season streaming when his numbers are highest. He might unironically video game himself, and that is Reddit code for kill himself. I get it though, and this person is saying that they should have done this to, try to get him to kill himself. I get it though. Stevens' Destiny had a shitload of stuff on his plate the past couple of weeks. Can't blame him too much. Let's just read a bit more. We have sleeper cells in every corner of the internet ready to activate. We are also in the walls. Dan is running Treadstone now. That's the work of the Dosad wing as an official representative of the Taliban wing. We claim no part in this. DGG actually does some of the craziest long cons, from fucking Rust to this. It's literally insane how fucking dope it all is. So anyway, reading Reddit comments aside, this is clearly just a trolling job that Destiny's community is doing to try to get Ethan all riled up about anti-Semitism and try to get Dan Clancy fired and Hasan banned off of Twitch. Ethan's a pretty dumb guy, I would say. I think that throughout covering all of this drama, he doesn't have the smartest comprehension skills. He's not the best at reading ideas and then, internalizing them and repeating them back to someone. He's not the fastest learner, I guess I'll put it that way. And I think that a guy like that can be he can get taken advantage of. And that's going to bring me to this post, and this is from Hasan's subreddit. So, to the surprise of absolutely no one, Destiny's attack on Twitch was never about anti-Semitism. Let's just play this.
I hated the last 2 weeks of my life basically to Steve's cause.
Destiny.
Which one? You're talking about the Twitch thing?
Yeah, destroying Twitch.
I thought that was more your thing than...
Why the fuck do I care about Twitch? I'm not banned there.
I thought you cared because they were anti-Semitic and being weird.
Nah, it's just fun.
Oh, okay. I care. I thought you cared, bro.
I mean, I care that I want to win. I care that it would be fucking awesome and funny if I won.
It would be awesome and funny.
It would be fucking hysterical if a company... Imagine if we trolled a CEO out of his job.
Okay, so kind of gives the game away there. And we can just read some more comments. Literally indistinguishable from 4chan, social misanthropes who just want to make everyone else as miserable as they are. So anyway, let's go back to H3. And this is kind of where Ethan Klein has ended up. He has ended up being the pawn of someone who's trying to get Hasan canceled for jokes, pretty much. Just thinking that it would be dope to see this pro-Palestinian content creator, this activist, this large voice getting canceled, and the Twitch CEO that has personal affinity for Hasan fired. And I think that this is just undeniable at this point. Ethan started off his attack on Hasan for what I can see are fairly valid criticisms. He was personally targeted by some people in Hasan's orbit. So that Comrade Casey post that included Ethan with some other liberal Zionists and said, hope they commit suicide squad. And Ethan, that was kind of the straw that broke Ethan's back. Then he had some big moments of Hasan that were kind of questionable, such as interviewing that Yemeni teenager and playing some Houthi propaganda music videos. So Ethan takes all of that and does this hit piece on Hasan, goes after him, and kind of gets that all off of his chest. Then he starts targeting Twitch. He starts targeting Frogan because he sees this Arab tier list that Frogan made saying that Arab, basically, and in Ethan's mind, he says that it's Arab at the top and Jewish people at the bottom, and that's untenable for Ethan. So he's criticizing Twitch for that. He's kind of criticizing, obviously he's criticizing Frogan, and he's criticizing Hasan by extension. And then we see a pretty marked shift in this criticism where Ethan starts going after Hasan for completely unrelated takes to the anti-Semitism crusade that Ethan's been on. And we see this on his pulling up a clip of Hasan talking about Tibet. And, oh, isn't that weird? Why is Hasan in favor of colonizing Tibet? Talking about the fact that Hasan was somehow pro the Crimean Peninsula annexation by Russia. That's a very weird suspect take. Why would Hasan be on that? Then Ethan brings on his Ukrainian employee and has her do hit pieces on Hasan. So it's clearly evolved from Ethan having genuine feelings of anti-Semitism in the spaces that he occupies online to now him wanting to just get Hasan banned. And you can see that he's kind of playing directly into the hands of this guy, Dan Salter, where the guy's like, yeah, I just want to win at this point. I just think it's fun. And they're kind of using Ethan as a play toy to get their kicks. Like, they're literally laughing at the idea that they're providing these clips to Ethan, and then Ethan's just running with them. So, again, I think it's completely disingenuous, and we can get a bit of responses from Hasan here.
You can count on me never aligning with Keemstar on a issue, you know. Just a bad guy overall. Yeah. Ay. Did you see what Ethan said about you last night? Yeah, I did. I mean, I don't know what the to say about that. Yeah, I'm Trojan horsing radical ideas into the left. It's wild to see former friends doing the Hasan ramp to try and farm, you know what I mean? Like that's like something that I did not expect. Like, that is actually a little bit shocking. I don't know what else to say about it other than that. But yeah, I've been watching you for over a year, and you've mentioned Tibet like twice. Like, I barely know your opinion on it. It's so clearly not central to your commentary. Yeah, no, that's like that's such a funny thing to be upset about. It's I mean, it's not a real thing. That's just, I think that, look, if I'm going to be radically honest, I don't know what people's opinions are. I can't see inside of people's minds, but I suspect that like all the Israel packaging that was cynical and really hurtful, but rather unsuccessful, didn't really work. So he's just like moving on to other stuff that he's getting directly from the Destiny community. And eventually he'll start talking about how I bought a car. And then he'll start talking about how I bought a house. And now I'm a fake socialist for that reason. It's just like, that's just, you know, that's just how it works. What are you going to do? He has already said you're just a LARPer. Okay, good. If I'm just a LARPer, then...
Yeah, so I think Hasan had a pretty accurate depiction of what was happening there. Yeah, where is Ethan coming up with all of these unearthed takes, especially when he said that, oh yeah, I agree with Hasan's takes on Taiwan, Tibet, and Ukraine, back when he was actually talking to Hasan, and now a year later he's coming up with these takes, and now he somehow has criticisms of them. And of course it is because of Destiny, and they're feeding Ethan these clips that Ethan really doesn't really care about, to be honest. We've gotten to the point that Hasan, he got this letter from Richie Torres, who is a sitting congressman. Of course, Destiny's super happy about that. Ethan Klein's super happy about that. We can see this post being covered in both the H3 community and Hasan Piker's community. NBC News picks up on Ethan's anti-Semitism call out. And we can see here, what does it say? Richie Torres supports Netanyahu. He only cares about this in so much that he feels any criticism against Israel is anti-Semitism. That's actually a pretty educated take on this. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about this story. Mentioning that these clips are clipped out of context without mentioning what's even being said sounds sus to me. The person writing this is clearly biased towards Hasan. It just glazes over 90% of the issues. So let's just get into this and read the article. Twitch faces criticism over Israel-Gaza war content on platform. A lawmaker's accusation that Twitch has seen an amplification of anti-Semitism since last year's Hamas attacks on Israel has put the streaming platform at the center of mounting scrutiny over its handling of content related to the war. Representative Richie Torres wrote a letter to the Amazon-owned platform last week, a copy of which was obtained by NBC News, calling for a probe into one of its top political creators, Hasan Piker, claiming many of his videos contain anti-Semitic rhetoric. A handful of streams are linked in the footnotes of the letter, including brief clips in which Piker is seen issuing his support for Palestinian people and criticizing Israeli leaders, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Piker told NBC News that many of the videos cited in the letter were taken out of context. He noted that in many of the videos being called out by Torres, Piker was criticizing the Israeli government, not Jewish people. Members of Congress frequently write letters in which they call for probes into different matters, though not all turn into investigations. So anyway, NBC News has had a relationship with Hasan. They recently did like a 15-minute feature video on him. And so they reached out to him for comment, and this letter is pretty pro Hasan, or this article is pretty pro Hasan. I don't think that they really misrepresented him that much, and that is pleasant to see. And it kind of shows that when you get people that aren't just Hasan haters or aren't paid by AIPAC and getting money to defend Israel, you get some nuance and well-informed views. And we can just see here like the reaction that Hasan's community is giving to this first reputable news article on this, and they can instantly sense that it's the same kind of Zionist smear campaign that we've seen so many times before. So yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. Some more reactions from the H3 community. Hasan has become the one thing he said he'd never be, a grifter. And just for some more context, this is 183 likes, 159 comments in 7 hours. Yeah, so, and then also this was interesting. So my sister and I got in a pretty gnarly fight over this clip. Help me out here. And this is the clip of Gila saying that she kind of does support what Rudy Giuliani was saying, that Palestinian children are taught at 2 years old.
Rudy was saying that Palestinians are taught at 2 years old to kill Americans.
That's pretty spicy.
Yeah.
Do we have that one?
Like, come on.
The other one.
I could add it.
He says that.
Israeli, Rudy was saying that Palestinians are taught at 2 years old to kill
So
Americans.
yeah, I pointed this out. It's pretty gross, and it's a symptom of Gila's brainwashing as an Israeli citizen,
Spicy,
and a member of the IDF. Again, we're just going over these dumb takes from people, but I do think it's important to kind of point out that there is some splitting in the H3 audience, which is kind of sad because Ethan's basically said, if you want to criticize what I'm doing, then you can stop watching. And he is losing genuine fans. Let's just read some more posts from Ethan here. So, also, I accept I've done racist things in the past that I've atoned for. Blackface is not one of them. Which snark video did you learn that from before spreading that lie? We did a black video about black cosmetics. It's still online and fully monetized because it's completely fucking innocent. We also did a yellow and white video on the same theme. Here's a link so you can watch it yourself. This is one of the quintessential lies that these hate videos have been spreading for years, so thanks. So, anyway, Ethan acknowledging that he's done shitty stuff in the past, and yet he's still willing to try to clip chimp Hasan for things he's done in the past instead of actually talking about it. And then Hasan makes a tweet in response to Ethan saying that he Trojan horses radical views in, and we can see what Hasan's tweet is. I'm anti-war and anti-hate unconditionally, even if it's America or its allies doing it. And again, if Ethan's going to be talking about Taiwan, Tibet, and Ukraine, in all of these instances, Hasan's pretty much been only supporting the sovereignty of the people. In Taiwan, he's saying that, yeah, the people want their freedom, but they also don't want an outright war with China. So honestly, I kind of support the one nation, two systems system that America and China have kind of set up. That it's like, yeah, we're simultaneously an autonomous nation, but we're just going to pretend like we're part of China so that we don't actually go to war with them. With Ukraine, the only criticism Hasan has given to that conflict is that he thinks America might be pushing Ukraine to remain in the war. With Tibet, the reason that he was pro-China liberating Tibet, and I'm not going to comment on this because I honestly just do not know enough about this subject, but according to what Hasan has said, he's pro-China liberating Tibet because it was a feudal slavery state. So again, in all of these circumstances that Ethan was criticizing him for, and we can see that this is what he's criticizing him for, Ukraine, Taiwan, and Tibet, Hasan has been pro the sovereignty of the people. So let's continue reading this. Even if it's America or its allies doing it, I believe we should spend the money we waste overseas killing people on healing and housing people here instead. I think those who consider my worldview to be radical are telling on themselves. And we, it is funny, like in this H3 clip, we do see Ethan even saying that he's a radical and he would consider himself a radical. So it's kind of funny that we've gotten this whole full circle moment. And then Ethan responds to this by saying, yes, my criticisms of Hasan are his radical opinions such as war is bad and housing Americans is good. Very good faith retelling of my critique. I can't believe how hard I've told on myself. I mean, bro, your only criticism that you gave here was the cracks began to appear when we started talking about Ukraine, Taiwan, and Tibet. And then Hasan has said, I'm anti-war and anti-hate unconditionally. It's kind of a it's kind of addressing your criticism. And notice that Ethan's gotten so far that he doesn't even talk about the anti-Semitism that Hasan is spreading. Ethan started off this conflict talking about, okay, a year ago, Ethan was like, okay, well, I discussed your Ukraine takes with you. I discussed your Taiwan takes with you. I discussed your Tibet takes with you. You explained it, and I accept that it's not crazy. All of your takes are defensible. A year later, Ethan started attacking Hasan for anti-Semitism. And then, when that's not really working out because he's running out of ammunition to shoot at Hasan, he goes back to the Ukraine, Taiwan, and Tibet takes and calls those radical. Is there anything about the anti-Semitism that, according to Ethan, was so bad that he had to call out Hasan for it? Because he didn't call out Hasan out of the blue on his Ukraine takes. He didn't call him out of the blue on his Taiwan or Tibet takes, which also Hasan doesn't really talk about that. So saying that he's trojan-horsing these radical views in is hilarious. It's like Hasan is secretly a anti-Tibet propagandist, and he's just doing the real long con of building up a progressive audience for the last 10 years and, you know, dropping a tidbit of Tibet or a tidbit of Taiwan like every 6 years or so that people really just get this subliminal messaging. But yeah, I don't think there's actually anything talking about the anti-Semitism that Ethan claimed was like the original genesis for this whole drama happening. So yeah, very good faith retelling of my critique. I can't believe how hard I've told on myself. Just saying, it is really hard to talk with Ethan. Like we've seen, going back and watching some of these leftover podcasts, you can see how hard it is to get Ethan to kind of believe anything. And then Fantano writes, Ethan is right. A few months ago, I didn't even know who the president was. But since I saw Hasan's streams, now I'm a Maoist, which is just amazing. And I think we can kind of end this whole Reddit conversation here. Also, look at the framing on this on the H3 subreddit. Fantano attacks Ethan for kind of like making a joke about Ethan's post about how crazy radical Hasan is. Okay.
I don't know what to.
We gotta watch this.
War criminal, okay? He's made a coalition of the most like radically conservative.
I'm I'm not going to watch this entire thing, but I think it's a good full circle moment to end this drama segment on. And this is the 5 days after the October 7th attack, where understandably you're going to be wanting to talk about it. And Ethan's in a very dark place right now because 12,000 people in a country that he lived in were killed. Hasan's in a very dark place right now because this apartheid state that he's been fighting against for the last however many years he's been politically active is now kind of ratcheting up their oppression of these minority groups that they're trying to ethnically displace. And so shit's kind of really hitting the fan for both of these guys. And I'm not going to be criticizing too much what they're talking about, but I do want to kind of illustrate how Hasan and Ethan interact and communicate with each other. Specifically Ethan, because I think Ethan does have a really hard time putting his own personal views aside. And you'll see this time and time again during this conversation, and where Ethan will say, you know, this is how I'm feeling, or this is how Israeli Jews are feeling. And then Hasan will say, I understand that. This is how Palestinians are feeling. And then Ethan will say, it's not about how Palestinians are feeling. I'm just trying to explain how Israeli Jews are feeling, i.e. how I'm feeling right now. So that happens over and over and over again during this conversation. And if you can identify that pattern, you can also recognize it in the way that Ethan's been doing this kind of like weeks-long drama attacking Hasan now, where Ethan will say something that doesn't really make too much sense. Hasan will either ignore it or he will kind of do a good faith response to it. And Ethan just doesn't take that response. He doesn't really acknowledge it. He doesn't try to incorporate it into his worldview. And in fact, he does the exact opposite. He will twist it to fit the narrative that he's trying to build more. The best example being the clip that I've played over and over again of Ethan hearing Hasan say that anti-Semitism is not very acceptable in American culture, whereas Islamophobia is acceptable. And then Ethan says, I hear that, I play that video, and what I hear is that Hasan saying anti-Semitism doesn't matter. So it's kind of like, it's very frustrating talking to someone like that. And you can see that Hasan has issues doing that even when they're talking in person. So let's just play this.
Freaks that don't represent, by the way, the majority of Israelis. And they're hellbent on genocide, frankly, overtly. They've committed tons of war crimes in Gaza, including the killing of children, obviously, because Gaza is one of the most densely populated places in the world. 50% of the residents are under 18. So when you bomb a building after Hamas murdered up to now probably close to 2,000 people, if you don't understand why Israel would want to retaliate, then you're not in favor of peace. You're not, because I understand, and a lot of Israelis understand why Hamas exists and why Palestinians and Gazans want to fucking kill Israelis. I understand that, and I have that empathy. I feel that a lot of people, not all, even a minority, but enough that it's noticeable, don't have that level of empathy where they see Israelis as like full-blown, diverse human beings that aren't fucking genocidal freaks, you know what I mean? They just happen to be on the side that has a bigger fucking military and has international support. And the result of that is obviously that a ton of Palestinians die.
I think...
Like, how's there ever going to be peace? Like, genuinely, if there's not empathy to at least understand. Like, I'm not to agree with, but to at least understand.
Look, I think Edward Said said it best, that it is not about, it's not even necessarily about designification of Israel. It's about maintaining peace so that everyone has a right to return and be able to live comfortably in their own homes. This area of historic Palestine did have Jews, Christians, and Muslims living side by side. Before the 1948 Nakba and before the British occupation, there was a time where there was peaceful coexistence. Ultimately, though, I think that the reason why a lot of people get really passionate about this, or the reason why I think I think the American media does a disservice to show the full breadth of the conflict or even the Israeli perspective by regularly running to the right of the Israeli government. That is, I think, by design. It is because we give a lot of money to Israel for its security and its defensive operations, as we call it. And I think a lot of that money has to be justified to the eyes of the American population. That is, those are our weapons ultimately that are being used and being deployed. It's our training as well. And it is very beneficial for Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, and many other defense contractors who saw tremendous gains on their stocks immediately after October.
So just one thing that I do want to comment about is that I think Hasan does a great job of taking what Ethan says and never fully contradicting it or saying that it's invalid, but kind of building off of that. And you can see that Hasan does that a lot throughout this episode.
Up and cynical as that.
Well, yeah,
but they just openly said that, right? I was watching the Israeli news with Ela this morning, and she was translating it for me on the news. They were saying the strategy is to get in as much bombing as possible before the international community makes them stop.
Yeah.
How fucked up and cynical is that?
Well, yeah.
But they just openly said that, right, Ela?
That's crazy to think that a year ago Israel was worried about the international community stepping in and stopping them from doing their genocide.
It's like news anchors speculating about the situation and all giving their thoughts. It's not an official
it's an analysis.
Government or IDF telling their strategy.
Well,
but they're all speculating, and they were saying how in their opinion we have a short time to respond before the humanitarian cause there is going to be so bad that everyone will tell Israel, you guys need to stop. So some of the citizens are actually upset because they want them to respond harsher.
Right. It's crazy. That's crazy. I want to say this about
it's kind of darkly humorous that every time Ethan says not all Israelis are genocidal freaks, there's a lot of Israelis that actually care about Palestinians. You'll get his point immediately, have the legs cut out from underneath it when Hila says, oh yeah, a lot of Israelis are mad, not because they're going to be bombing Palestine as much as possible, causing a humanitarian crisis, knowingly causing a humanitarian crisis to the point where the global stage is going to have to step in and just be like, yo, you can't do that anymore. They're not mad about that. They're mad about the idea that there would be people coming in and telling them to stop. So they're even more genocidal than the government is. So it is kind of funny. Every time Ethan's like, oh, but there's so many Israelis that aren't genocidal. And then Hila's like, yeah, they actually wish that they were more genocidal. Just a funny observation.
Settlers in the West Bank are religious zealots. They're monsters. They're genocidal, fucking fundamental monsters. They are also, I would even say, settlers, they're participating in this dangerous conflict. Okay? And they're putting themselves in this dangerous place. Now, I want to make it clear just while I'm on this point, the people who were murdered outside of Gaza were not settlers. Those were normal motherfucking people living normal lives, living on kibbutz and communes, fucking communists, living a peaceful life with their families. They were not settlers. Settlers are involved in this war, I believe.
There used to be settlers in Gaza. The military had to forcibly remove them from Gaza so they could completely shut it off and begin sieges whenever they felt like mowing the lawn.
So, and anyway, the Israeli government enables the settlements. They encourage it with the express purpose of erasing Palestinian land and making peace near as impossible as they can.
So there's something important to mention here, important to acknowledge here. I think that that what you just described, especially in the West Bank, which is settler terrorism, at least according to international law, and it's fully understood to be an illegal occupation, demands constant military support, because you cannot, over the course of 75 years, build settlements and act like you are turning a blind eye to it, maybe sometimes halt it, maybe sometimes continue those operations of building said settlements, bulldoze homes, build roads that specifically partition off areas where Palestinians are supposed to be living on their own land in the two-state solution that has been reaffirmed time and time again. You can't have that be your peaceful coexistence project and not recognize that of course Palestinians see that and think, okay, well, what the fuck are we supposed to do? There's no Hamas in the West Bank, and yet the Palestinian Authority is collaborating with Israeli security operations, giving up 14-year-olds that were throwing rocks and shit like that, while they're losing their land, they're losing their homes. The area, according to B'Tselem, which is an Israeli organization, the area of West Bank of all of the agricultural land and all of the partitioned off lands that have been expanded into through settler terrorism, which is completely illegal, went from like 10% in 1967 to more than 75%. The areas that are partitioned off also have no contiguity, which means that like if you are Palestinian living in your own home in the West Bank, in order to get to your uncle's house, for example, you have to go through a multitude of IDF checkpoints. There are 2 separate license plates given to Palestinians living in the West Bank versus Israelis living in the West Bank. And I think many brave and very intelligent and very empathetic Jewish activists have talked about this in far better terms than I have. But one that comes to mind immediately is Gabor Mate, a Holocaust survivor and a very famous physician, very famous doctor, where he said it best. He said he has friends that live in America and Palestinians that live in Canada that cannot return to their homes in the West Bank, that cannot return to their homes in even Israel proper, their family homes. And yet his friends, regardless of whether or not they've ever lived in Israel, or regardless of whether or not where they're from around the world, can go to Israel and go specifically to West Bank and be able to sit on top of Palestinian land and own that land. That is horrifying. That is...
Yeah, so it is interesting that what we're getting right here from Hasan is he's describing the mechanisms that a colonial apartheid state uses and kind of the personal experiences that people have interacting with these mechanisms, where Palestinians need to go through multiple checkpoints just to go from one end of Palestine to the other, with Israel in the middle. How Jews have just special privileges underneath the rules and laws of the ethnostate that they're taking a part in. And Hasan is doing this obviously to kind of set up and describe the not only the power imbalance, but just the facts on the ground that is in Palestine. And I think that, I mean, let's just play this, but I do think it's important what he's doing here. It's giving more context to the October 7th attacks. Like, this was 5 days after the attacks happened.
Impossible to come to terms with. And I think that violence is a necessity in the maintenance of such a structure, which now many NGOs and even former Israeli officials are considering is an apartheid. And it has been for some time now. And of course, that violence that Palestinians endure on a daily basis is going to create more reactionary forces within it. This is something that I have said about the invasion of Afghanistan and the invasion of Iraq. And this is something that I even said about Russia invading Ukraine, is that more reactionary forces are going to be seen as the emancipatory forces when an irredentist power or an imperialist power goes and tries to seize land that it does not own. This is the second part of the brutality of the occupation that has made it seem as though Palestinians have no choice, that has created no opportunities for them, that has led to Hamas being able to seize more and more power after being democratically elected one time in 2006, pretty much.
Right. And I do want to make clear that, again, as we talk about settlers and all this shit, that settlers are not the same as regular Israeli civilians. And I think, you know, having been listening...
they're American.
Actually, a lot of them are American.
Yeah, they are the most... Yeah. They are... my friend Noah Colwyn calls this the zealotry of the convert, where I was talking to him yesterday. He's a former editor-in-chief of...
The worst religious people are the ones that are born again or converted when they were adults. And I do want to commend Ethan for kind of, you know, throwing the settlers under the bus and identifying the fact that settling West Bank, settling Gaza is just pretty much like a war crime. But like, I know Hasan said that the settlers are American, but a lot of the settlers are also Israeli. Like, there's a big pro-settler movement in Israel.
Currents. I think he was editor-in-chief. He still is a contributing editor. We were talking about like the most reactionary, the most violent activity often comes from the likes of Baruch Goldstein, right? An American Israeli who went in I believe 1993 into a mosque and shot and killed 29 Palestinians who were praying during prayer. A person that was hailed as a hero by the current minister of the current administrator of the entirety of the Israeli police force, Itamar Ben-Gvir. Itamar Ben-Gvir and Benjamin Netanyahu are incredibly far-right politicians that now control the Israeli government. The last time that there was any kind of negotiation between Palestinians in good faith, between a person who was still a Zionist, like Yitzhak Rabin, they killed him. And the people that called for his assassination, like Ben-Gvir, are now in positions of power in Israel to show you how much the attitudes and the governance has changed over the course of the past 3 decades in Israel.
I want to say that I agree, and a lot of people in Israel do. It's disgusting, the people that are there right now in power. And if I can add something about the settlers, that's another point of frustration for a lot of Israelis. They send the soldiers to protect them. Soldiers that have to put their life on hold because the IDF is mandatory. They're just 18-year-old, they're children. They have to go and protect the settlers. The settlers don't go to the IDF. Orthodox people don't serve in the IDF.
Fucking nice.
Yeah, this is
insane.
yeah.
Hold on.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm done.
That's kind of just one comment on that. Complaining that the settlers need to be protected by soldiers is kind of like a microcosm of Israel in a nutshell, right? When you're sending settlers into West Bank, taking over land, displacing people, just pissing people off in general, you're going to need soldiers to protect those people. You're going to need military force to enforce the borders that you set up. That is exactly what Israel is, but on a larger scale. It's a settlement of people that moved there and displaced people that were living there, and is now enforcing these borders that they've set up through just overwhelming military might. And so when people are complaining about how the settlers need soldier protections, it is just kind of funny because that's just a smaller version of Israel in a nutshell.
No, I was going to say that the amount of people that don't know that I've seen that IDF is mandatory service is crazy. Hila is not serving the IDF ideologically because she wants to fucking kill Gazans or whatever bullshit people always say about her. It's mandatory conscription. It's mandatory. Every Israeli has to
That's why there's
serve.
organizations such as IDF Veterans.
I mean, I think that you can avoid conscription. You'll just be like isolated. You'll be a social outcast.
Against the occupation that are very that are organizations that I rely on when making assessments on what's going on the ground in Israel as well. And here's the thing. Yeah, this is a relatively controversial perspective. It's just that the official government attitude has oftentimes, or at all, as a matter of fact, ever reflected any kind of attitude within the Israeli population, as it has either deliberately or in secret continued the settler expansion protocols since 1967 especially. So that's basically burning the candle on both ends, okay? On the one hand, you're telling Palestinians, hey, if you collaborate with us, we are still going to have these psychotic American settlers come to your uncle's house and take it away from you, bulldoze your house, partition your neighborhoods, okay, and set up a two-tier checkpoint system that B'Tselem calls, like I said, the permit regime, and constantly harass you. They can spit on you, and if they spit on you, the IDF's official protocol in that situation is to defend the settlers. They're not there to defend the Palestinians. Mm-hmm. Like, they might in certain instances, but overwhelmingly their job there is to specifically defend the settlers.
And again, like you was touching on, you're sending young men out in harm's way to protect these provocateur, fucking religious zealot radicals. And again, like Elis, the irony being that they don't even need to serve the military. I mean, it's a fucking joke. Yeah. So I think that it's especially important.
Okay, so just to correct myself, I'm reading an article from the Jerusalem Post, and there are two groups that are exempt from military service. There is the ultra-Orthodox Jews and Arab Israelis. And Arab Israelis is basically Arab people living there that are not Jewish, because, there are obviously Arab Jews, but they need to distinguish the Jews from the non-Jews. And they don't want Arab non-Jewish soldiers in the IDF. However, so those people are exempt. However, successfully circumventing mandatory enlistment is becoming an increasingly widespread occurrence in Israel. The enlistment rate among Israelis who are obligated to serve has plummeted from 75% to less than 50% in only 20 years. While Israeli law allows the military to punish draft evaders with jail time, the reality is that most cases are simply ignored. Hence, compulsory military enlistment in Israel is but an old myth. In reality, 35% of the Israeli population carries the burden, while the remaining 65% find ways to avoid military service without having to suffer any consequences. As a result, motivation among new recruits to join combat units is declining at an alarming rate. According to recent surveys, willingness to serve in combat units dropped from 90% in the 1990s to 80% in 2010 and to only 67% in the last enlistment round. And this article was written in 2018. So you can see that there is a large portion of the Israeli population just simply not enlisting. And so would you lose out on social opportunities? I'm sure you would. I've watched interviews with Israeli students who have dodged the draft that have refused to enlist. And they basically said they're not going to go to jail, but what's going to happen is there's not going to really be social willingness to progress them up the social ladder, and they're not going to have that networking that is super important when you join the IDF. It's kind of like dodging the draft in any country would be. However, it's not the same as not paying your taxes and going to prison in America. Not that you can even really not pay your taxes in America, which is something Ethan disingenuously said. You're not going to go for prison for it, and there's a large section of the population not doing the draft. And let's just be honest, Hila is a Zionist. She likes the IDF. She joined the IDF. She was working a desk job. She volunteered to go on a mission in the field, went to a city, kidnapped people there. If Ethan is going to say that it's compulsory, it's not. It's pretty much just a part of the Israeli culture. And sure, if you don't join it, you might lose out on opportunities, but it's not like you're going to rot in a prison for 20 years if you refuse to take part in an apartheid and a genocide.
For people to keep in mind that Israel is so far from a monolith. It's people need to understand that, and that people need to understand that we're not all guilty of the crimes of our government, because if that was the case, heaven would be empty at the end of the day. I mean, this was the analogy I was making. If you're American, and if we're going to blame the citizens of Israel and say they're all, and some people have been saying this, and I have clips that I want to watch later, saying that all Israelis are occupiers in fair game and deserve to die, essentially. If you're willing to say that, then if, like, a terrorist cell comes to a fucking neighborhood in LA and wants to do revenge for the million Iraqis that the American government murdered during that war, then you're telling me you would have no problem with these terrorists coming and killing everybody you know?
I mean, you are sitting next to someone who said America deserved 9/11, by the way.
Okay,
so
well, how would you feel?
I want to let you know.
How would you feel if people were blaming you for the Iraq war and coming and killing your fucking children and your grandma and your parents and your friends and your family, burning your house down, burning people alive?
I don't disagree with you on civilian casualties. I think that ultimately we have a moral obligation to speak out against our government and do everything we physically can to stop that kind of bloodshed. I agree. And I think that plenty of Americans at least kind of recognize that this is a war machine that they cannot stop anymore. So my goal at least is to get people to not champion it. And the same goes for Israeli action, the Israeli government's actions specifically, just like the American government's action. Because at the end of the day, what I want and what I believe many of my friends who are Palestinian advocates and activists and Israeli activists as well on the ground, what they all want is peaceful coexistence. But peaceful coexistence will never be achieved as long as governments can behave in whichever way they want, especially as it comes to blood and soil propaganda and the consequences of that propaganda being, blood and soil actions.
Man, and this is the exact view that Hasan has been talking about when we've been dredging up all of these old clips, when he's talking about Tibet, when he's talking about Taiwan, when he's talking about Ukraine. He's only said, I want peaceful coexistence. And this is a radical view that Ethan thinks Hasan is trojan-horsing into his leftist audience.
Same with America. Same with Israel.
I think that Israelis, and again, I hope that you'll see where they're coming from when you say they're cagey, they're paranoid, they're scared, and they feel threatened constantly.
Yeah.
And so when Israelis see a ton of leftists talking about, go Hamas, cheering on Hamas, or saying like super hyperbolic shit about like civilians are all settlers, or or saying shit like, listen, it's a revolution. What do you expect? Like, what is a revolution supposed to look like? Or whatever of all of these qualifiers, basically, that people want to make. The Israelis see that and they say, oh, these people just fucking hate us. They just want to kill everybody. That's why we're going to vote for these scumbags.
I don't think that the people that vote for those scumbags are motivated by like some random Twitter person being like, this is a revolution.
It's a feeling that people get. It's not a random.
Yeah, so it is kind of funny. Ethan's saying that people are voting for very genocidal politicians like Netanyahu and Ben Gvir because they're seeing leftists in America posting stuff that's saying that, oh, all Israelis are Zionists. All Israelis, they're going to get pushed back by this revolution. This is just a part of a revolution, this violent outbreak. And Ethan saying that's causing people to get radicalized. Hasan would argue that they've already been radicalized, and that's why we're getting this oppression that Gazans are experiencing.
Complete.
Yeah, so
hold on, go ahead, Ela.
I want to say Ethan is right, and so many people in Israel just feel like it's an existential threat. It's just this, everybody wants us dead. That's how we grow.
So she's saying it's an existential threat. So many people want people in Israel dead. Are they talking about the American leftists that are, throwing up Palestinian flags, throwing up watermelons online? Is that the existential threat that people are feeling? Because if it is, that's pretty sad. And I think Hasan's going to get into this here, but this is not a unique fear that people have. Whenever you have a ruling class, the ruling class knows that they are oppressing the people below them. And that oppression, even though it's done by the people on top, will inevitably lead to fear of reprisal. When in the American South during the slavery period, you had white plantation owners like beating slaves, having slaves. They were always afraid that the slaves were going to do an uprising and get revenge on them. And that's why you had rules like slaves couldn't read books, no education for slaves, splitting up families so they couldn't build communities. It's always going to have this fear of, I'm doing this atrocity to them. What if they do it back to me? And that's pretty much the big fear that Israelis are experiencing in this situation. And let's just be honest, that October 7th attack that Hamas made against Israel was a fraction of the taste of the oppression that Israel had been doing on Palestine for decades. And so, in a sense, the fear is a correct emotion to be feeling, because you are increasing the pressure on these people to the point where they have no other option but to act out violently against the oppression that you're giving on them. But it's misplaced in the sense that it shouldn't guide your next actions. In fact, you should examine that fear and understand that your premise is wrong. Your premise that you need to oppress these people is incorrect. And that's what Zionists are missing. Just that empathy and that reassessment of their premise. Because, of course, if you start off with the premise that, yeah, I do need to oppress Palestinians, then the natural conclusion is we need to kill them all. Because Israelis are able to, Zionist Israelis are able to recognize, just Zionists in general, Zionists are able to recognize that this position of having Gaza in an open-air camp and slowly colonizing the West Bank over a period of time, That is an untenable position to be in. Something's got to break, because that is not a system that will maintain itself for any significant period of time. And you either have two options. Either Palestine will become free, or you're going to kill everyone in Palestine. And the Zionists have decided on the latter option, which is gross. All right, I am falling apart, but I want to watch a little bit more of this exchange just because I think it's so interesting. And then I'm going to call it pretty soon.
I grew up like that. All of our borders, they all want us dead.
Rockets are always coming over.
I was afraid to go on a bus as a child.
And again,
it's like that's your life. You're under threat all the time.
And it's not, and it's important to say this is not about right or wrong. It's about having empathy for the Israeli experience.
Just again, you're living under threat all the time. What is the threat? Well, the threat is that you might taste a bit of the oppression that you've been dishing out for decades. So you might taste a bit of the oppression that you've been doing.
Okay. And how, and it's not about right and wrong. I have to say that. I have to emphasize that. It's got nothing to do with that. Okay? It's about understanding their perspective and knowing that when you have these super, accepting views on violence and revolution and all this shit towards Israelis, it's not one tweet that people see, Hasan. It's all the shit people see over the years all the time. And it causes them to act irrationally.
Okay. I think that you bring up
Okay, so Ethan says that the tweets that Israelis see cause them to act irrational. Previously, he said that it caused them to vote for the fascists like Netanyahu and Ben-Gvir. So Ethan's saying that the anti-Israeli sentiments that Israelis see online is causing them to be more radicalized, which is just an insane take. And I just wanted to take the time to break that down. It's not the idea that Israelis are radicalized in their schools and through, their own nationalist propaganda that says you as a Jew belong here. You are God's chosen people. You are ethnically superior to the people that are living here. These people are living on stolen land. It's actually our ancestors' land, so it's our right to come and kick them off of this land. It's not that's radicalizing Israelis and Zionists. It's leftists posting Free Palestine on Twitter. Just a completely delusional take, and you can see that even a year ago, Ethan is still in this very tight online, progressive-leaning bubble where he sees these tweets, and that's what's causing Ethan to feel bad. And he's reflecting these kind of harmful feelings that he's getting into the idea. He's trying to justify why Israelis elected someone as evil as Netanyahu, pretty much. And he's saying it's because of leftist tweets, which is pretty crazy. And it's also telling, it's like, is Ethan experiencing feelings like that? If he's seeing tweets that he's saying cause Israelis to become fascist, is he admitting that he has this inclination to become fascist? And I do think that whenever Ethan talks about this is what Israelis are feeling, he really means himself. So that is kind of a telling part. And you do see Ethan not becoming fascist, but leaning more and more into personal attacks on Hasan and kind of trying to get him canceled at any cost. So just getting further away from fact-based criticism, at least in this most recent tirade that he's given. Let's continue.
Really good point about paranoia. The reason why, well, first of all, we don't have to get into like the history of why Jewish people would be understandably paranoid and worried, considering how they have historically been singled out as villains every single fucking time, from blood libels and pogroms all the way to the Holocaust. So
you would understand it's hard for some people to distinguish. No, I know you do, but 100%. I'm just saying this. I'm just saying this.
100%.
You might understand how it's hard for some people to distinguish anti-Semitism between criticism, especially when it's a criticism that's very lax on violence. against Israelis.
So you're absolutely correct.
Again, Ethan's referring to himself here, and we can see that, a year from now, Ethan will take a post that says we're going to kill all Zionists, and he says that, oh, well, this post means we're going to kill all Jews. So pretty clearly referring to himself here, and he's kind of like using this as a narrative device to distance himself from the situation, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. If he's able to use this to kind of trick himself into being more open about his emotions and his feelings with Hasan, then that might actually open up a better line of dialogue and communication than if Ethan was consciously centering himself, and that might cause him to shut down if he did that consciously.
On that front, here's what I will even dive into further, and this is something I talked about on my stream as well. The paranoia now that manifests inside of Israel, as far as I understand, I don't live in Israel, I've never been to Israel, is, at least from everything that I have read on not just Israel but also apartheid South Africa, and the Algerian anti-colonial action against the French, and numerous other formations of occupation and the emancipatory struggle there. The paranoia manifests and becomes a part of your identity because of the violence that is a necessity for the maintenance of apartheid. Because it's, of course, it's almost
Look,
the same
Israel
as
was
like
under
Americans
threat
being very
before all
violent
this shit
people.
happened. I mean,
What's up?
from the moment as Israel was established, the neighbors were trying to kill them.
Well, I mean, I don't know if we agree on that.
Really?
I will say that I think that Nakba was an unjustifiable act of violence that was the formation of the state. Now, you can say every state is formed through an act of violence. All enclosures are defended through acts of violence, certainly. But I think that...
So just Hasan was starting to build the case that what I was describing, that Israelis were feeling this paranoia, this fear of retribution pretty much because of the violence that they use to maintain their state of Israel. And then Ethan responds by saying that, oh, well, they've felt that before they really used any violence. They felt that immediately because all of the Arab states immediately tried to invade them. And that's just completely overlooking the Nakba, the massive ethnic displacement that Israel had to do to non-Arab or non-Jewish Arabs to create its own state of Israel. So just a little bit of historic illiteracy from Ethan there. Let's see if there was corrects it.
This extends, like what you say to West Bank, what you say about West Bank settlers was the original position of the Israeli state's formation. And this does not, in current day, justify like random Israeli children that are born inside of Israel proper to be considered enemy combatants. I agree with you there 100%, because that is not problem solving, that is looking for vengeance. However, if we are to say that like Israel from its development, like in its inception, has always been under the threat of violence from other nations, bordering nations, certainly sure, but Israel's formation was a violent one.
But let's just be real. Hey, let's be practical. I'm talking to the Israeli psyche.
Yeah.
Okay. Like.
And this is kind of just what I was talking about, how Ethan keeps centering himself in this. And it's not even like the topic's getting off of the psyche of Israelis. Hasan's just trying to offer broader historical context to explain why Israelis might be feeling this way. And Ethan just kind of ignores the introduction of this added context in favor of just hammering home the idea that Israelis are feeling persecuted right now. And this is why I was saying earlier that it's extremely frustrating to talk to Ethan, not only post after post in this game of like telephone where Ethan makes a video, Hasan makes a video, and neither of them really respond directly to each other, but even when they're talking face to face, Hasan will make a point, Ethan will just hand wave it away and go back to the point that he's trying to make. And Ethan doesn't have the most coherent points because, again, this is more of a therapy session for Ethan than serious analysis of serious political analysis of the current events that are happening in Israel. This is a way for Ethan to kind of air out his grievances and his feelings on all of the social media buzz that he's been inundated by.
You know, 1973, every bordering Arab state wanted to just coalesce to destroy Israel.
Also, just to point out here, Hasan's talking about how Israel had to use violence to create itself, and then Ethan's like, okay, forget about all of that. Let's talk about the Israeli psyche. In 1973, all of the Arab nations attacked Israel. It's like, okay, so you're like telling Hasan, don't talk about that. I want to talk about this, and then immediately start talking about what Hasan was talking about already.
1973, every
Israel's formation was a violent one.
But let's just be real. Hey, let's be practical. I'm talking to the Israeli psyche.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, you know, 1973, every bordering Arab state wanted
Literally,
to.
you can see like the fucking error message in his brain, and then he's like, okay, let's go back to what I was talking about that you were refuting, and then I said I didn't want to talk about. It's like, ding, ding, ding,
You know, 1973, every bordering Arab state wanted to just coalesce to destroy Israel. Okay? Like, this is ingrained in the Israeli psyche, this kinds of shit. And even back then in 1970, people were just born there. You know what I mean? And again, I'm not even saying right or wrong. I'm saying it's important to empathize with the Israeli experience if you ever want to achieve peace. Because otherwise, the only other option is one side kills the other side completely.
Yes.
That's the only end to this, otherwise.
And the side that's going to kill the other side completely is not going to be the Palestinian side. That's the point. Like, that's never... I don't think that is ever going to happen. I don't even believe that is legitimately what every single Palestinian wants either. Just like I don't believe that's what Israelis want across the board.
I'm not saying anybody wants that. I'm saying that's what the peace that they're working towards when they don't have the ability to empathize with the enemy. You don't see them as human beings. They're never going to fucking see you as human beings either. I know, you're never going to meet in the middle. And
you recognize that the same goes for, like...
I'm talking about both sides, man.
Yeah, I think that...
So, just one more thing. Ethan spent this, like, the better part of these last 5 minutes talking about how you need to empathize with Israel. And then Hasan keeps saying, okay, but, you know, we should also think of Palestinians. And Ethan will respond by saying, okay, but you're not thinking about how this is affecting Israel. And then when Hasan says, well, I think this applies both ways, Ethan's like, yeah, I mean, I am talking about both sides, but you're not thinking about how it applies to Israel. Again, just kind of incapable of understanding this issue from a different perspective. And this is why I say that this is more of a therapy session for Ethan this is more of a therapy session than it is a political analysis session. He's definitely, you know, centering himself in this. He's using a lot of like templates in this conversation to insert himself in there, where he's talking about this is ingrained in the Israeli psyche. That's like code for how Ethan feels. A lot of Israelis, you know, turn to fascism because of this. They get radicalized because of this. That's obviously how he's feeling right now. So there's a lot of tools that Ethan's using kind of subconsciously to convey how he's feeling. And he's coming at this conversation completely one-sided. He's completely unwilling to kind of grasp how Hasan is feeling. He's just not open to understanding how Hasan is feeling, and I'm not even saying that Hasan's doing the same thing Ethan's doing. Hasan's not really talking about how he's feeling. Hasan's actually offering political analysis, which is something that Ethan's just completely not open to. And then, so Ethan's coming into this trying to convey how he's feeling, and he's unresponsive to either political analysis or how Hasan is feeling. And Hasan has, you know, he'd be ostensibly on the Palestinian side if he is going to talk about how he's feeling.
I agree with you that dehumanization does occur, but I also believe that one side does still hold all of the power, and that is the side that is the state that has been backed by the entirety of the Western world, that has an incredible security apparatus that for the first time ever in 50 years was actually shattered, which is why I think there's like a lot of a lot of fear internally inside of Israel and a lot of anger towards the security candidate Benjamin Netanyahu specifically. But overall, it is certainly Israel's conflict to end. You know what I mean?
Eli, you were trying to say
Can
something.
I add that my generation's grandparents are people that survived the Holocaust, and they escaped to Israel to start a country for Jewish people because we all know the Holocaust. They were all, butchered. And what happened this time is a really scary reminder to all of us Jewish people.
Just wondering, isn't Hila an Arab? Like, isn't her family ethnically Arab? Maybe she actually did have grandparents in the Holocaust, but I know Ethan always talks about how diverse Israel is and how the majority of Israelis are actually Arab Jews. So, like, the Holocaust had a part in the conception of Israel, but talking about how everyone's grandparents were in the Holocaust is kind of dumb.
And that's how I feel, at least, that it's a reminder. The Holocaust wasn't that long ago, and
it's just homogenizing Israeli culture into one ethnic identity. And there's a lot of different ethnicities among Jewish people. Turns out Judaism's a religion, not really an ethnicity. And even though Israel claims it's an ethnicity, if you look up its demographics, they have it broken into actual ethnicities.
Every year on Holocaust Day, the thing they tell you is never forget. You always have to tell the stories to everybody about what happened at the Holocaust. And it's always like something taken for granted for me. You just grow up and you're like, yeah, Holocaust Day, it happened, we all get it. But what happened this time is really scary, and it really does bring up this topic. And
See, I don't think that you can even say something like that without starting a debate, and I don't think that's right.
I think the reason why people would react to it, or even myself, as a matter of fact, would react to that is because while you're absolutely correct and your feelings are totally valid, what is happening currently is a ongoing.
Just love how Hasan has casually identifies the fact that this is a therapy session for Ethan. Just oh yeah, your feelings are totally valid. Not even pretending Ethan's engaging in any kind of systemic analysis.
At least 75-year campaign of ethnic displacement upon people who had nothing to do with the Holocaust. And that is,
Dude, we're just talking about the Israeli psyche.
I understand.
So what is it you're saying though? We all know that, but we have to be real about how we interpret everybody's suffering. Everybody is bro, you don't know how crazy it was. We were listening to the news on the day it happened, live, and families are calling in whispering. The terrorists are killing their children in front of them, burning people alive in safe houses. Shit, you know what I mean? Shooting babies with AK-47s. And so I'm just saying, it's important to empathize with how a Jewish person, or specifically an Israeli, might feel hearing these phone calls.
There are kids that survived because they were laying under their dead parents' bodies, and they laid there for hours, the whole day, and that's how they survived. And the last time we heard stories like that was at the Holocaust.
And I'm not saying it's not about right or wrong. It's just about having the empathy to understand your quote enemy, to understand the perspective. And I'm not asking Gazans necessarily even to be oh, well, I appreciate what they're going through. I'm talking about people who want to fucking debate it all day long. And, this stuff does influence people. The demonstrations you see out there that happened immediately afterwards, these people have an effect on attitudes around the world.
I don't think that they
So Hasan's going to go on to say that they're not actually changing the material conditions of anything. Obviously, Israel has just as much support as they've ever had. And just once again, to kind of illustrate the dynamics of having a conversation with Ethan, you have Ethan centering himself, being conveying his emotions when you try to offer some greater context and understanding of the situation. It's just met with rejection and saying that, well, you're not actually engaging with my emotions right now. And we've seen Ethan do this throughout his entire drama campaign against Hasan. He will make clips. Hasan will respond to them, Hasan's responded multiple times. And then Ethan will just say, okay, well, you're not actually addressing my points. And Ethan won't even really he'll just like, keep attacking. Let's watch this a little bit longer.
Any say or any effect on the Western world's united defense of Israel.
It affects anti-Semitism, and it affects how people treat Jews, and it normalizes, by the way, treating Israelis like animals.
I don't believe that we should treat Israelis like animals. And one thing that you have, I think, that many people do not, is the experiences that you mentioned, as far as children hiding under their parents' bodies, is in this very fucked up way identical to the existence of people living in Gaza every single day under brutal fire from a much more superior military force. The reality is that most of...
So I just want to point out here that at no point in this conversation has Hasan ever invalidated Ethan and Hila's feelings about this. He's only tried to build bridges to get them to understand kind of the Palestinian viewpoint of this. And that is an extremely valid thing to do for Hasan here. And I don't think you can really ask much more of Hasan in this situation. He's acknowledging the way that Ethan and Hila are feeling, and he is doing his best to bring up the other side of this conflict and drawing as many parallels as he possibly can. And it's just unfortunate then that Ethan and Hila they seem to be so involved that they really can't look at this with any other viewpoint that I am the personal victim in all of this. And as such, they are unable to connect with these parallels that Hasan is kind of offering to them. Whenever Hasan says, I understand how you feel, and that's actually how Palestinians feel, should we not try to, come up with peace together? And I know Ethan will say peace, but whenever Hasan brings this up, Ethan has this reflexive response of, why are you bringing them up? You're not understanding how Jewish people feel. I'm just talking about how Jewish people feel right now. And of course, Ethan will have this like sloppy terminology where he'll go between Jewish people and Israelis.
Of the world, most of the Western world not only does not see that, but also immediately rushes to equate people saying free Palestine across the board in an unflinching way to a defense of Hamas or Hamas operations and whatnot. Are there people who do defend Hamas? Certainly. But ultimately, the overwhelming majority of activists that I know, the Haaretz editorial board, and the perspective of like Shin Bet officials that say that Israel's actions in the West Bank is becoming a security risk because it is radicalizing Palestinians into taking an incredibly anti-Israel posture. Former Mossad members, former Shin Bet officials united in saying the same exact thing.
And these terror attacks do the same. They radicalize Israelis.
Of course, I understand that. Violence begets violence. Mm-hmm. That is a constant, no matter what. So what we have to remember is who holds the power to scale it back? Who holds the power to stop the violence?
I think a lot of people do know that and remember that.
Yeah, and so when people say that this is this violence that occurred in Israel proper is directly a consequence of the brutal apartheid regime and the conditions that it set forth for Palestinian people.
That's a fine statement that I agree with.
Yeah. So when they say that, you're saying that people equate that with like a defense of Hamas.
No, that is not what I'm saying.
There are people
that is not what I'm saying.
There are Gazan
people. Just to be totally clear, dude.
There are Palestinian Authority people. There are people in Gaza that are not Hamas at all, or there are Palestinian Authority people that have been going and doing the rounds in Western media. And the question always is, do you condemn these actions? Do you condemn these actions? Of course they condemn the actions. But the reality is that after condemning the actions 1,000 times over, it feels like the goal there, if you want to understand and empathize with the Muslim side of the conversation, it feels like the goal there is to derail, to stop talking about Gaza, stop talking about Palestinian people, just condemn the actions and shut the fuck up. And even if you do, as I have time and time again, people still go, well, your name is Hasan, you're Muslim, you're a supporter of terrorism. And this happened in the immediate aftermath of 2001 and 9/11. And ironically, as far as I have seen, at least in the Israeli left, the position is significantly more tempered than the American liberals were at that point, where George W. Bush's approval rating shot up to 91% after 9/11, where America's comfortable security blanket was penetrated, and our collective consciousness changed in that very moment to say, oh my God, we can actually experience this violence in our own homes. And the same goes for Israel as well, where you've mentioned rocket fire. Over the course of the past multiple decades, since 2000 onward, before the October 7 operation, that the casualties were, of course, asymmetrical. Rocket fire still ended up killing people in Israel proper.
Again, it's like you can look at the numbers, but like, of course, because Israel has it's still the provocation, it's still the attempt. You know what I mean? Just because they have the technology to shoot it out of the sky doesn't mean that the people in Israel are not going to be affected by it.
No, I understand that, but there's
also,
a
I want to say,
there's something different,
I need to make something clear
What's
that you touched on. I don't think people who say I support Palestine are pro-Hamas. That's fucking insane.
Okay.
It's like the opposite of everything I've ever said. Okay. There is something I noticed that rubbed me wrong, which was that as the news was breaking, as people were still calling in saying, I'm in my safe house, I hear the terrorists outside killing my neighbors. People are on Twitter or whatever, or activists, whoever, because saying, let's go Palestine. Go Palestine. So how am I? It's the timing, Hasan. It's important. Like, we got to make this huge distinction. When people are saying go Palestine as they're terrorists killing people, that to me, I don't know who else they're cheering on other than Hamas.
Okay.
Now, if you wait, like, you know, it's the timing, dude. It does matter.
There's an asymmetry to the violence, but there's also an asymmetry to the coverage as well. What do I mean by this? Mia Khalifa is a good example. You and I were talking about this on the phone earlier. Mia Khalifa said...
Yeah. I mean, this is unfortunately the violence that Israel experienced on October 7th is a result of systemic oppression and apartheid. And you even have Norman Finkelstein say, I cannot condemn these actions because this is inevitable whenever there's any kind of resistance groups. And so you can understand why people would be supporting Palestine even on October 7th. It's a series of brutal oppression and apartheid that Palestine was subject to, and they finally took a stand, tried to make a final push, and you know, you can say that they were trying to take, like Hamas specifically was trying to take control of their destiny. They were trying to take any actions that they had left to them to feel a little bit of power, to have a glimpse of power that they've wanted to always have a take back their sovereignty in whatever small amount they can do through this violent action. And you can say it's not the best tactic to push for change, but you are going to get people that are kind of celebrant of this display of freedom, honestly, that Hamas did. And obviously, there were brutal acts done on October 7th from Hamas. And is it the best time to celebrate being pro-Palestinian? No, I don't think that even a violent uprising against an apartheid oppressive military regime is the best course of action. And I think that this last year has kind of reinforced the idea that that's not a good tactic to actually get freedom and gain sovereignty. But can I understand why people were posting that for getting a taste of revenge at its very basic, like most base level, and at kind of its more idealistic level, getting a taste of sovereignty and freedom. I can't criticize it too much, and obviously it depends on what people are posting it for. If people are posting it because Hamas is killing innocent people, that's not the best, right? But if they're posting it because honestly, on October 7th, on the actual day, people didn't really know what was going on. You heard that Hamas was attacking, they broke through the gate and they were attacking military targets, because Hamas did mostly target military targets. I believe it was something like 60% of the total casualties on the Israeli side were military. But obviously Ethan does have a point, and it's right to feel. I do kind of understand why he feels like that in this
things
context.
That I find to be distasteful and wrong. Okay.
Worse than that.
I think it was distasteful and wrong. I think it was callous. The indifference to violence that civilians are subjected
I kind
to
of agree with
on the
Hasan
Israeli
here.
side as well is callous. However, the reaction to Mia Khalifa has never ever occurred on the other side
You're right.
when Israel
You're
is
right.
engaging in bombing
Yeah, it's
campaigns.
fucked up.
And like you said, the horrific images that you saw that draw so much emotion out of you of Palestinian fathers holding their daughters in this open air prison. There is no equivalence. I think a lot of people who have been advocates for Palestinians for many, many years, especially if they're Muslim, know this reality that you have to be incredibly careful all the time with your rhetoric, and that even in an emotional moment, you can never never say something that will be misconstrued. And Mia Khalifa said something that was inappropriate and unacceptable.
Hold
okay?
on. She showed a picture of terrorists roaming in a pickup truck murdering civilians. She described that as a Renaissance painting.
Yeah.
And she went further and said, "Well, the Palestinian freedom fighters, please flip their phone
I know.
vertically." I mean, that's worse than unacceptable.
So
it's evil.
So you're correct on that.
Okay.
So let me ask you this though.
Yeah.
When Lindsey Graham goes on and says this is a religious war and we must ethnically cleanse, we must wipe our
Evil.
enemies,
Should get the same coverage.
No, I know, but it doesn't, Ethan. That's the point.
I understand.
Marco Rubio would call for ethnic cleansing. These are people in positions of power. These are people who are literally facilitating in the bloodshed. These are people who actually are engaging in the continuation. These are not former porn stars who were Christian Lebanese who now.
Whatever, dude. She was getting a lot of attention. People were liking it. It wasn't like. But here's the problem.
That's meaningless, is what I'm saying in the grand scheme of things, because that doesn't.
Hasan, let me make my point.
Go ahead.
When you say like the timing is fucked up, or like why does Mia Khalifa get all this shit? And it's like always a whataboutism. It's always like you can never just say yes. And also, can we fucking hold Lindsey Graham accountable? Which I agree, and it's crazy the shit they say, and they should get more attention for it. But it's like there's a refusal to acknowledge, like it's always about like, well, what about us? Which I understand, but it's like you have to say yes, you have this thing, and we also have this thing, and not like in the same breath say but yes, but like it just doesn't feel it feels fucked up.
I think the former.
Yeah, so Ethan doesn't like that because it does feel like Hasan's invalidating his feelings. Hasan's never invalidated his feelings, and the only thing that he's been doing in this conversation is trying to connect Ethan's feelings to the feelings of Palestinians and also provide a broader context to the audience members, because the audience of this show and Hasan's audience needs to understand the power dynamics that are at play here. Israel is an apartheid state. It is a colonial power propped up by America, propped up by the UK, and has been engaging in this apartheid oppression over however many decades that it's existed, over 50 years. Just oppressing people, taking their land, ethnically displacing people, and that's pretty much all Hasan's trying to do. Anyway, I don't think I need to explain Israel's, like, how that Israel is bad to my audience. I think that if you're watching me, you understand that. And I just wanted to go back because this was kind of the beginning of the end for the Hasan and Ethan relationship. And you can see, and I really wanted to illustrate the dynamics of talking to Ethan Klein, especially on an issue where he is so emotionally charged. He's essentially unable to remove himself from the situation to kind of accept what his interlocutor is trying to convey to him. And we have seen him kind of get more and more away from fact-based criticism, and at this point he's just coming up with random clips to attack Hasan. And unfortunately, we have seen this campaign that Ethan's making against Hasan get co-opted by just Destiny and Destiny's orbiters. Some really gross Hasan haters that are out there. They're providing Ethan with all of these clips. They're laughing at the fact that they're trying to get Hasan banned. They're trying to get the CEO of Twitch fired. And this has just spiraled into a really gross situation in general. And I'm really glad to see that people that I respect, like Vaush, And the majority report are standing up for Hasan. And even though Vaush and Hasan have had their differences in the past, and I'm really happy to see that there is a lot more mainstream support for Palestinians. So that gives me hope that like guys like Richie Torres, Destiny, and Ethan aren't going to be successful in their cancellation of Hasan. But it still is just this drama, which started off as what seemed to be a misunderstanding for me. And my first video was actually really trying to correct Ethan on this and hoping that he would talk to actual experts in the field of Israel versus Palestine, like guys like Norman Finkelstein, even guys like Ta-Nehisi Coates, who aren't experts, but they have a pretty well-informed opinion of the matter. I was hoping that you talk to them, but his community just keeps getting worse and worse on the subreddit. Ethan's criticisms of Hasan get more and more bad faith, and I just do not have a good feeling of where this is going to go from the future. So once again, I'm going to just stop covering pretty much anything on this for at least the rest of this week and cover some more fun stuff, cover some election news, cover Sam Cedar. But anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. Really appreciate all of the support, all of the engagement. Love reading the comments, and I really think that we're building a pretty good community here. I love the fact that people watching my videos are criticizing me constructively. They're providing feedback and additional context for things that I might not know that much about. I also really appreciate everyone who is calling out hateful comments and not really letting anything that is said in bad faith or is just bigoted slide. I really appreciate that, guys, and that to me is a sign of a really healthy community. So thanks for supporting me these last few weeks. Thank you for your views, thank you for your subscriptions, and thank you for commenting. It really means a lot to me, and I'm going to call it here. Have a great rest of your day.